When the organizers asked me to have this topic with you, originally I have a very technical topic. But when I asked who is the audience for this conference, Jonard said that most of the audience will be students. And my eyes lit up after that. I realized that a good topic for you is after this less than 1 hour session, you will have a good framework, a good idea um, about how security is being implemented on a corporate level in a way that you yourselves will learn the depth of opportunities and struggles that there are in the cyber security world. I mean, we don't know. This might be a start of you considering a career in cybersecurity, or at least most of the people that I know, when they talk about security, they only know a very small part of security. But I might tell you, just sit back for the next 50 minutes after this session. You will be able to tell yourself, I know security. You know, in my experience, 80% of what I'm doing, I will be sharing here. So there will be quite a large number of information, but I hope it will be interesting to you. So before I start, um, Diane already introduced me, but let me just tell you a little bit more of what I do and why I do it. I have two branding for myself. I have the career brand. That's what you see on the left side. I'm a transformational infosec leader. What it means is that in my experience, I always see I always get to information security teams who at the start are struggling to find their identity and to secure the system that they have. But at the end of a few months and years, they evolve and become really good security team. So I know the experience of having a bad security team and being transformed into a good one. And I want to share that to you, to any conference that I'm in. The next one is on a personal brand. I'm a life coach and career mentor. I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a husband for just over 2 months now. And I also do security stuff for personal projects. OWhatsApp and OSA, open source security architecture, are open source projects that soon, hopefully, I'll be contributing into as well. So like you, um, I don't know a lot about security 6 years into my career, but after meeting someone from a security guy who introduced me to Hacker Exposed, it's a Google book on hacking. I I I never let go of security, but it took me 6 more years for me to get an opportunity to enter into cybersecurity. And now I'm almost 5 years into cybersecurity, and this presentation is a culmination of that presentation that I wanted to give to you. So, to start our topic, let's first define some terms that I might be using more and more in this session. First is attack surface. Attack surface is really about the holes and gaps in your computer system that the hacker can take advantage of, cause damage, and steal information. So the more gaps and holes there are in your system, the bigger is the attack surface. So that's what we're saying when we say attack surface. Next is brute force. Brute force is having a list um, and using that list one by one to a target and seeing what items from the list the target is vulnerable from. So maybe, for example, just a metaphorical illustration. Um, Example, in your classroom, you have a friend, a guy friend, and you wanted to know if he is vulnerable to a certain girl, meaning who he likes, like a crush, right? So what you do is you go through the list of the names of the girls in your classroom, ask the person, and when your friend smiles to a specific name, he is vulnerable to that girl. So that's how simple I would like to say what brute force really mean in a human term. Next is DDoS. So I'm really glad that Raymond, the speaker previous to me, mentioned about distributed denial of service. So I won't mention this a lot more, but essentially, hackers or organization or individual are using a lot of devices distributed in a network outside of your company to attack your company and wreak havoc and cause damage or bring down your servers. Next is vulnerability. We just mentioned vulnerability is a hole and a gap that a hacker can take advantage in your company. Next is protocol. Okay. So a protocol is just language. It's just that there are languages that are being used by the machines, languages being used by applications, and languages that are understood by human beings. But all of this, we will just mention, they are protocols, okay? Protocols are languages. And then security control. Security controls are activities. It can be a process, it can be a technology, it can be a physical activity that you use to mitigate or fill in the gaps in your system or vulnerability to alleviate the effects of the vulnerability. So with that, we are ready to go to our topic for today. Just how much information are we really trying to protect in the internet? So as of 2020, there are 2.5 quintillion bytes of data per day. Um, how much is 2.5 quintillion of bytes of data? Just count, according to the article, just count 250 million of people and count their neurons. Every person has 100 billion plus of neurons in them. So that's a big number. But if still that is not something that you can relate to, think of for every person in the world, in the 8 billion plus um, population we have in the world, the data that the internet is processing can produce 1.7 megabytes per second of data for each person. So 1.7 megabytes is really our low-res image, if you may, but it's already clear in the internet. So just think about it. If it is for per second and you have 83,000, almost 83,000 of seconds in a day, you produce 83,000 pictures. Like how many pictures do you take selfie every day? And you produce 83,000 for each individual in the 8 million population of the world. That's how big the data that we are having in the internet. And just think about it. There's a 3.5 billion of searches in Google every day. And the most amazing thing here is that only 53% of the people in the world is really using the internet. So not even the 47% or half of the world needing cybersecurity protection. So this is mind-boggling, and a lot of this information are not produced by us, but produced by companies. But the question here is, what information are helpful to you, to me, and what information can you protect? How can I ensure that I only get the helpful data from this internet? And how can I avoid the malicious, the viruses, the fraud data of this world? Now we go to the solution. This is a framework that we will use to introduce how security can be introduced to your house, to yourself, or to the companies out there. It is the layers of security. So what I will, by the way, the layers of security is not applied by everyone. So I'm really glad to tell you this so that after this, you can apply some of the principles into your own life or in the company that you will be going to later on. I know after this, there's also a hacking activity. Definitely, you can use the principles here to increase your perspective to make you successful on that event. So with companies who has millions and even billions at stake, this is the level of security they wish to employ, this framework of layers of security. And mind you, I updated this one. It's quite an updated information that you will be having today. So when I go to each of the layer, what we will do is I will give a defining story for that layer, and then I will clarify what part of the computer system is for that layer. I will then try to mention fun facts about that layer, and then I will give you the sample security controls that you can do or applied by companies in that security layer. So let's start with the first layer. The first layer is the perimeter layer. The perimeter layer is really the first layer that receives public data into your computer system. It protects all the other layers in your computer system. It is what we call the frontliner defense. In in this pandemic times, right? We have what we call frontliners that protects us from COVID or protects us from sickness. The perimeter layer of security is the one protecting our system as well from the public internet. Let me tell you a defining story for this. In my previous company, in my previous job, a hacker attacked us with 90,000 plus devices. 90,000 plus devices. Meaning we got 90,000 unique IP addresses that are all doing the same thing, attacking our computer system. It is trying to brute force our registration page, trying to brute force our login page and our accounts in the system. Come to think of it, the average of our active IP addresses or users in that company is just 250,000. And during that day, we have 350,000 unique IP addresses that we are processing. So almost 25% of that of the traffic that we're having are coming from a malicious actor. Just think about this in when you're inside the mall. If you let in 25% of the people as malicious people or bad guys, for sure that mall, you will never want to get there in that mall, and that mall will go bankrupt, and it will never stay in business, right? That's what we're having during those days that we are being attacked by this hacker. So in our computer system, in this picture that you see, the perimeter layer is really this part that receives all the messages coming from the public internet. The job of the perimeter layer is to authenticate and authorize messages that are coming into your computer system. Just like in the mall, right? You don't want bad guys or suspects to come into your mall. Why? Because you want to protect the real customers inside the mall and all the assets that you have in there. So what you do is you check their information, right? To ensure authentication authorization. Another information that we're using now is the temperature, right? Because we don't want someone with suspect COVID to enter our mall, our mall. But that is with human beings. But how do you do that with internet messages? You know, the Internet Task Force created a, a big list of identity data for every message that we are having. So this is a sample HTTP request. For every activity you do in the internet, it sends this type of message. So you have the first line and all of this information in the headers that gives identity to your message. So right now, I will give an example for this one. Bear with me. Um, So just bear with me for a little while. Um, For example, I go into Facebook, and let's see if Facebook's perimeter layer will be able to authenticate me. So before I go to Facebook, because that will send a message, I will first look at my network and see my message. So every one of you can do this. You can go to your Chrome, no, not go to the task manager, but go to developer, more tools, developer tools, and see the network tab. When I go to Facebook, my computer has the information, my identity, and it will be sending it over to Facebook. So let's try this one. So when I go here, you see it is now sending a lot of messages to Facebook. So we are contributing to the quintillion of data that we are processing in the internet. So you just choose one um, message here that we sent to Facebook, the very first one. So you see you have here the headers, and let's see the request headers because this is the first information I've sent them. So my computer has told Facebook that I have user agent that I am using Mac OS X 10.14X. So I'm still in Mojave OS. So try to hack me if you like. Let's see if that will work. And I'm using Chrome version 88. I'm also having this information that my computer sent that my ID in Facebook is 521,931,809. That's my ID in Facebook. So I might be the 500 millionth user. And I have all this other information that obviously are protocol of the application that Facebook is using. Now, eh, what am I able to get into Facebook? Am I able to get to the mall after being authenticated and authorized? Yes. Obviously, yes, because it gave me all my personal information, all of the postings of my friends, and that's how it happened. It can be an information that was validated by the application, but it was first validated by the perimeter layer. So those are the fan facts for the perimeter layer. Now let's go to the security controls that you can handle, that you can implement in the um, perimeter layer. So you have here, um, sorry, I hope all of you have seen that. You can, by the way, try that while we are having this session. So these are the security controls that all the security professionals are trying to implement to their companies. A lot of you doesn't know about this, but if there's a perimeter in your network at home, that will be your router, the first one who receives all the information and sends the information outside. So do you have this sort of controls in your router at home? Do you do VPN? Might be familiar with URL filtering. Do you do SSL or TLS? Are you familiar with this? The attack a while ago with the hacker with 90,000 devices, we can do rate limiting for him if we have that control. We only applied it when we got attacked. Yeah. So you might, I won't go over all of this list, but the green ones are security controls that I can also apply not only on the perimeter layer, but also on the other layers. So later on, you will see a repeat of this ones in the green, but the white ones are mostly applicable only to this layer. So that is the perimeter layer. So far so good. Is it information overload for one layer? So there will be more. Let's go to the interesting network layer. I will go fast with this one. The network layer is the next layer being protected by the perimeter and protecting all the other layer beneath it. In the you also call this the private network. The private network must have a good level of security to ensure proper and efficient flow of data. I think the illustration that I can tell you about this is that when you have a system, it can look like an office space, right? if each person going through the office space is a transaction in your computer system, you need to ensure that you know where the um, sensitive places of your network is. In this example, we have the ATM machine here. So this room is kind of sensitive. So you need to have controls, security controls here. So you have the armored door here. There's another door here. If you don't need this other door, just close it, right? Another sensitive area here is this transaction section. So only the cashiers are here and there are windows in front of it. There is also a vault in this room, and you only have the security portal with biometric filter or authentication before you enter it. So if you compare this into a computer network, this setup, the computer network doesn't have the door, the armored door, the windows, the biometric portal, but it has this. It has switches, routers, VPC flow logs. In the cloud, you have those terms, peering, site-to-site connection. And all of these things, of course, are unknown to you. But what they do is they transform the protocols um, of data from light, light, as in light that you are seeing from the sun, that contains information, or radio waves that contains our information, or electricity that contains information. Decode that um, light, radio frequency, or electric protocol into something more machine-like, and extract from there the domain that you came from, the IP address that you will go to, the port of the server that you need to go into, and the message. So it transformed those information so that the information will get and be routed to the right person in the world. So these are all friends for us in the network. But because of those so many stages, the hackers has a lot of attack surface as well to play around. There is what we call DNS poisoning. Like your domain name can be poisoned so that your message will not go to where it should go. Okay, there are a lot of attacks here, and some of these were mentioned by Raymond as well. So I will not go to that. So those are some fun facts. So if you have this again as your illustration, the network layer is this inside of your system where the messages should flow freely. And the security controls that you should have here are, again, these were mentioned previously, the firewall, encryption. You need to do asset inventory. You need to harden all the switches, routers, and when you say harden, you need to only, again, put controls like what you have, like the armored door, like because the controls are too technical for us to remember. So I'll just mention system hardening. And then intrusion prevention system. You might be familiar with the walls of your houses. That should be the network segmentation, because some parts of your house or the office are more important or more valuable than the others. So you need to segment them in order to protect them. All right. So that is essentially the network layer. There's so much more to this, of course, but I leave that to you, a general picture of what the network layer security is all about. Let's go to the next layer, the endpoint layer. The endpoint layer, oh boy. The endpoint layer is more relatable to all of us, to all of you. The endpoint layer is being protected by the network, and it is protecting all of the other layers beneath it, of course. And they mentioned now in the pandemic times, in the time of remote work, endpoint is the top priority of C-suite. When you say C-suite, according to this trend report of 2021, C-suites are the C-levels, the CEO, the COO, the CTO, the CISO of your company. And they mentioned that endpoint is now a top priority. This is because everyone is now working remotely. The question is, are you protected by the network or perimeter? Because if not, you will be more exposed there to hackers. So if this is the network that we have, the endpoint layers are really the machines where the message ends up being processed. So that means also your phone, your laptop, those are endpoints. So how are your endpoints? Are they secured? Especially in these pandemic times and remote work, that gives a lot of value to you. Are you securing your endpoint? What's the big deal about this endpoint? There is this what's happening in the world, we call it the Big Bang. It's really the explosion of the number of devices and endpoints that we are using. In 2006, 2 billion, 2015, 15 billion, and just after 5 years, 200 billion of devices. So why so many devices? It's really because of productivity, right? But from the endpoints that we are hearing, like your laptops, devices, the drivers are really automation, Internet of Things, um, and also remote work. But the most users are coming from the industry of the business, manufacturing, fintech, and healthcare. Like 70% of those devices are being produced by them, and mostly in the cloud. So, is this phenomena in the endpoint layer good for cybersecurity? Let me give you a, a little bit of a geeky answer for this. I also shared this, by the way, last year when I spoke here in Sitesville. So if you have 5 telephones, right? How much is the attack surface that you will have potentially? So when you have 5 devices, you potentially have 25 attack surfaces as an abstract count. So to understand this better, let's just go for 2 devices. For example, 2 devices, right? This one is already an attack surface. So that's one. This another device is another attack surface. So that's 2. And then the message you're sending from this device to this device is another attack surface. And the message you're sending here to here is another attack surface. So that's 4, 2 squared. Now, add another 1 to that, you have another attack surface, and the going to and fro to the other and to fro to the other. So that is 3 squared. And then you multiply it. So the more you connect devices to the data, the more attack surface there will be. And this is the theory of the Metcalfe's law. So is it good or bad? It's bad for us. There will be an increasing area of attack surface, the more explosion of devices there will be. So the more we are becoming a playground ripe for hackers to get information, like what was mentioned by Raymond. Raymond, I'm sure, can just choose a lot of attack areas there, surface areas there, just because most of the devices are not secured. The question is, are you securing your data? So what we know most in our endpoints is that these problems of malware, virus, trojans, worms, bots, spyware, ransomware, and rootkit. And definitely, I know those hackers around there can definitely put this into endpoints that doesn't have security. So what parts of our endpoints are important to hackers? These are the most important ones. Of course, your operating system, because your operating system is the one managing and transforming the hardware, the messages receiving from the hardware and transforming it into the language of the software and rendering the image to all of us. It is using this, the number one library or software it's using to do this is the kernel. It's also using this BIOS software. It simply means the input and output part of the system. Like if you insert USB devices, you extend your laptop into a monitor. You use BIOS software inside your endpoint. There are also reserved, registered, and ephemeral ports, or these are just gates, gates into your laptop that can receive the information. And you know how much gates do you have? There's an operating system called Linux, right? It has 65,000 plus ports. And just for one application, it could work to just 2 ports of that. So there can be thousands of applications that can work in your endpoint. So are you securing all that gateways? Windows and Mac endpoints have more ports than in Linux. Files and folders, of course, you know this. Memory is needed. Processor of the endpoints. So all of this are really important, not only to your endpoint but to the hackers. They can really um, put malware into your system to attack all of this. That's why sometimes when a malware is there, your endpoint suddenly heats up, your phone suddenly heats up, because all of this can be utilized by the hacker. So it's easy for us to manage to see managing our endpoints as one computer and taking care all of those parts, essential parts. But just think about the modern world in the companies. They are not managing only one server. So this mindset of managing a pet or a sheep is no longer applicable. What they are managing in the emergence of cloud technology is really a cattle. So they need to think of managing servers and those parts within each servers as a cattle. So they cannot do this manually. No one can do this manually. So all of you here, it's really an entry point to automation if you go to cybersecurity, because they need to manage these huge servers and tag each of the servers and separate it from those that are more critical than the others, and have an automated way of putting security controls. So this, so, and now this is the security controls that you can put into your endpoint. So listen, because some of this you might be able to put into your phone or um, to your laptop. Encryption, of course. Vulnerability management is simply updating your software. Again, antivirus and anti-malware. By the way, for mobile phones, I believe Total AV made a promo recently, just $1 for 1 year. So that's 50 pesos for 1 year. That's a no-brainer. I mean, get it, Total AV. Um, you also have in the cloud container security and some serverless security controls. So multi-factor authentication, of course. So auto-scaling, load balancing. Of course, I will not get into all of this. But these are what information security professionals are doing. Are you interested to maybe do some technical stuff? This is what we are having in the cybersecurity world. So before we end on this layer, I just want to mention what Kevin Fielder said. The endpoint is kind of the perimeter for a lot of offices now. This is really a sad quote, because that means there's no perimeter layer or network layer protecting the information that are coming in to our offices, because now in the remote work world, your laptop is the first layer of defense to the important data of your businesses. So how are you doing with your endpoint security? Let's go to the next layer, the application layer. The application layer is being protected by the endpoint and of course all the layers before that. And it is protecting a very important part of your layer into your system layer. And voila, 90% of attacks still happen in the application layer. You know why 90%? Because if hackers are able to hide themselves into your application, they will have a direct access to your whole network. Because if your application accepts that hacker, it will pass through the perimeter network endpoint, and it will process whatever the hacker is trying to do to your network. You know, the Equifax breach. This is a company in the United States, and it is one of the biggest breaches in the 21st century. It paid $350 million during the time of its breach, but because of the damage that it caused to the American people and the data that it showed, up until now, the cost of the support that they're doing is reaching to this almost $1 billion of damage. You know what was their problem? They just decided not to upgrade a specific software. To us, when we don't upgrade our phones, it won't cost us that much. But for them, it cost them $650 million. So that was like an education to application security. So this application security layer is really this part of your system that processes information. So I will not mention a lot of fun facts about the application layer because a lot of you knows this and it has been hearing a lot about about applications. But this is something that I will add into your knowledge, hopefully. Mobile apps have eclipsed the number of websites. Just imagine that. This is now becoming, this has overtaken probably laptops in terms of value. That's why you can never say that why the phone is sometimes more pricey than the laptops, right? But that is now the value of your mobile phone. It is more valuable to human beings nowadays. 91% of cyber attacks started with a phishing email. So, are you a detector of a phishing email, or there's now SMS phishing? So phishing is really hackers trying to deceive you that they are sending a legitimate email and asking you to click something to open that will really download malware or do damage to your computer. So that's a phishing email. So be very careful with the phishing emails that you receive. Next, 93% of breaches could have been avoided by taking simple steps, such as regularly updating software or leveraging modern cloud-based solutions. So that's why Raymond mentioned that the question a while ago is, can you use Google Drive or any cloud-based solution out there? The answer is yes. They know their protection, and you have a shared responsibility. They will try to do security controls on their own without you even asking. So it is okay. But of course, you have a responsibility to do as well. And yes, are you updating your software? So about the controls that you have in application, these are all the testing. So these are more corporate focused, what they're doing whenever they are releasing software. So if you're in a part of a corporation and you're not doing some of this, you might need to consider if your application is being attacked. So this one is really about, of course, each of these tests is doing something separate on addressing a separate security concern of the application. But the goal of all of this tests is to patch your application or to update your application. So this one is testing the library. This one is testing the code that were created by the developers. This one is about testing the HTTP messages or the messages that your application is producing. This one is, of course, the database. All of these other tools are for correlation and for a combination of the things at the bottom of the pyramid. So sorry for that. So how it is used in a corporate environment. So once the developer creates the code, like he submits the codes and uses those test operations to see the security of the library and also the security of the code. If it doesn't pass and there's a security the correlation tools will send it back to the developer for patching or for fixing. But once it passed, it will do further tests. Um, and then if it's still not passing, it will go back again using the correlation tools. You might be familiar with Jenkins or CI/CD tools, continuous integration tools. And then when it's now fixed and passed, it will be given a go signal by the quality assessor. So if this is something that interests you, this is another field in the company that you can go into. Next, the last layer. In our illustration, this is the data layer, where the money is, where the decision making really happens. And it says in our modern times, data is the new oil. I know you heard about this. But let me tell you first where the data layer is in your system, computer system. So this is the data layer. So it should be at the latter part of your computer system, right? In your cases, in your house, the data layer is already in your laptops, in your phones, or it is connecting in the internet and getting or saving the data there. So that's the data layer. When you talk of the data layer, a defining story will always be data privacy. There is an ongoing war in data privacy. This is not coined by me. This is coined by the Prime Minister of Shinzo Abe, a member of the G20, which is a group, an organization with leaders from the top 20 richest nations in the world. And their topic is about what we call the data privacy war. So do not coin me on this. So if you're a person that doesn't know much about data privacy, hang on for the next 5 minutes, because you will definitely say to yourself, now I know what's it's all about, why data privacy is important. So let's talk about data privacy. Nowadays, if you enroll your Google account, Gmail, into Facebook, right? And you do a Google search about, for example, rubber shoes, right? You will see immediately in your Facebook an ad on what? Nike, right? And wherever you enrolled your Gmail, you will see in the ads that there's something related to shoes later on. So what happened there is that Google mined your data and uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to connect you to the different companies and sell your data to them. So your data was sold to Facebook. And then Facebook also mined your data, use AI and ML to sell your data to the right rubber shoes companies, merchants, for those merchants to give you the shoes that you are looking for. So essentially, 3 companies will benefit on a profit level once you buy those shoes to the merchant or to Nike, for example. This is now the new world that we are having. That's why the Prime Minister of Japan says that everyone is trying to create laws or regulations to get as much data as possible, but because that is now the new oil in this era that we are having. So before, wars are being taken to have more oil, but now the battlefield is between Google, Facebook, Tesla, Uber, Amazon, which are the main tanks of data processing and data mining. How about your company? I'm not sure how you are doing. So countries now creates this laws and regulation, and normally they are created into three categories. The first type is data localization. It says here that India and China is currently developing a new electronic commerce that has a broad-based data localization. This only means that when your data gets into their country geographically, that country has the right to store your data. So think about it for a moment. Isn't that a little scary? That you have no control of your data. They will know where you're going, where you're coming from. So for example, if you go to American companies, right? Your data will probably have a lot of computers and probably will go to China and to India geographically as well. So they will have a copy of your data. So the US government is a little bit angered on this type of regulation for India and China. Why? Because they are basically going to intercept intellectual property, source code, and of course, information of people. The next type of regulation that is being created around the world is the controller or processor centric. There is data protection focus, but not data privacy. This is more of the regulation being used by Google company, by Facebook. That's why, without your consent, they are able to give your data to other companies. I don't know if they already changed their data privacy regulations, but this, at least 2 years ago, the more type of regulation they have. So the company has sovereignty over your data. The last type of data regulation is the GDPR-based privacy. In this type of regulation, you, as the owner of your data, has all the rights to your data. You have the right to be informed where it should be used. You have the right to erase that. You have the right to object not to use it for marketing. You can mention that. You have the right not to let it be used and given to other companies. So, you as a Filipino, do you have this? Gladly, yes. The Data Privacy Act of the Philippines is a GDPR-based privacy privacy regulation. So good for us. There are last year more than 50 nations created a version of this GDPR-based privacy. And right now, China is in this confusion because most of the citizens wants this GDPR-based privacy and not the data localization type of privacy. So you can kind of understand now the struggle with with countries and the war that is having, right? So with all of these different regulations, what will happen is that some companies will use your data without your consent, with whatever, in however way they are using it. So that's why you have these issues with TikTok, right? Because it's a China-based company. You have this issue with Zoom, that before the traffic is getting into China and there was a leakage at the start of the pandemic of all the data that are coming through the China geography. Your data will go where you didn't expect it will be, and nations will be suing companies. An example of this is that Google was sued 50 million euros. They paid the US company of Google paid 50 million euros to France just because they have misused the data of the French people. Because again, in France, they are using the data subject rights framework, or the GDPR. So what's the problem? What happened there? You know, the only problem with the Google pages is that when you create the page, the the terms and condition and the data privacy is automatically checked already. But that removes the user the right to object or not to object, because you don't really read those data privacy, and so the default settings are usually just, you know, allowed by the users. And this is not so with data privacy, because the power is with the data subject or the owner. You need to actually tick the box. So just because of that feature, they paid 50 million euros to France. So that is the war that is ongoing on data privacy. Data regulations will have a ripple effect on all industries and in the world. If in the Philippines, if your employee count is more than 250, you have to educate yourself on data privacy. And even if not, when you have a breach, you have to answer to the National Privacy Commission of the Philippines. Having said that, and some fun facts about that, data privacy is not the same as data security. Data security empowers data privacy. So, what should you do when you are doing data security? First, you need to identify not all data needs to be secured because some data are public, right? Like your marketing materials, you really want it to get out there. So even if the hacker gets those materials, it's okay. So what you have to identify are what are your critical data, sensitive data, internal and public first. And then you need to put the proper control. So sorry, forgive me for using this um, information, which is a little bit blurred. Um, so, but this drives home the needed activity that you need to do for your security data security layer. So some of the controls are this one. And you might be more familiar with backup. Are you doing backup? Shredding, this is more familiar on papers, but there's also digital shredding. Are you using vaults like LastPass or some software vaults for your data? Do your company do privacy impact assessment well? Do you have a data privacy officer in your company? So that's our layers of security. But there's something missing here that I want to tell you as well before I go. First is that all of these are being protected by what we call the physical layer. Just for your appreciation, let me tell you the story about the physical security layer of the biggest cloud provider, Amazon, which is, as of last year, it became one of the first $1 trillion worth company in the world. And as you can see in the picture, their data centers, this is just one data center. It is as large as several football fields. And it contains just servers to provide and to hold the internet together. So, what are the physical security controls they need to provide in this very valuable piece of asset? You have here on the left side the processes that they do. And on the right side are the technical and physical controls that they have. So first, they try to evaluate if the environment is good and geographic. That's why they don't put it in earthquake-prone areas. They try not to put servers or big, they don't invest big data centers there. They put additional servers to ensure that all the traffic, there will always be an additional servers to accept the surge. There is monthly infrastructure assessment. They ensure that whoever enters their gates in the data centers physically, that logically that person is only allowed to certain parts of the data center. And of course, they do inventory management system as well. So for the physical controls, they do CCTV, and they have multi-factor authentication in their ingress and egress. Just imagine this in your school. Do you want to be authenticated as well when you are going out your school? In data centers of AWS, they are doing that. So I just want to mention, I wish that's the last part because we're almost time. But there is the last one that protects all of these layers. I wonder if you can guess what that layer is, because that involves you. All of this is nothing if the people managing this are not knowledgeable or not skilled enough for security. So this human layer, Um, let me tell you what are important for this human layer. First is the skills for every human to to manipulate or to handle and manage all these layers. So how big is really the cybersecurity skills gap? So just for a moment, let's take a break. Before taking a break, how much is the skills gap? There's a 3.5 million cybersecurity personnel needed in the world last 2020. In the Philippines, just last year, 2 years ago, there's a needed 30,000 cybersecurity personnel. And um, this CISSP professional just speaks of how small are the senior skilled cybersecurity in the Philippines. So look at the gap, the mind-blowing gap in our in our um, management of security in all of our systems. This is prevalent around the world as well. Let's take a short break and celebrate my picture here because I want to make us understand um, what is the solution to this cybersecurity skills gap. I graduated from Masters of Technology in Diliman, and I don't need to prove that to you, like show you my diploma, because you just need to go to the website and you will see me there on their homepage. I'm there, so I definitely graduated from that school, and this is part of my study, how to bridge the cybersecurity skills gap. This is part of my thesis, and what I want you to look at are the activities that could impact the cybersecurity number and skills in the Philippines. A lot of this in the lower portion in this quadrant are what we are currently doing. The government are pushing InfoSec programs. You have NPC, right? You have DICT. The government-private sector partnership is strong. Um, and the production of InfoSec professionals from private sectors are happening. Like me, I'm from the software sector, and now I'm focusing on InfoSec. But the other things that we need to do are here on the top. We need to produce cybersecurity professionals from the universities. More partnership from the government and university and the private sector should happen. So I'm really happy for Sitesfield that they are doing this because they are connecting to schools and trying to create awareness and interest for schools, because this is the way to contribute to this need to enhance our infrastructure in the Philippines, to have more people to manage security and educate people for security. We all need security awareness. This is not only for the professionals, but all of the audience here. You need to be the human firewall. The perimeter is not the only firewall there is. You need to be a human firewall. So let's check yourself if you are a human firewall. Are you doing these top 10 activities? So all of you here, the 600 plus here. First, in the perimeter of your home network or the network you are in, are you enabling firewall at work or at home? In your network, are you only using secured Wi-Fi? Check or not check? Are you installing malware on all of your devices in your endpoint security? Are you installing security updates on your machine and your software? Are you detecting phishing, emails, and SMS? Are you able to detect that and identify that? Do you know your data privacy rights? Since you are here in the Philippines, you have the power to do that to all of those um, companies that might use your data against you. Do you back up your data? Do you invest on security systems like Vault, alarms, and CCTV? Do you have your dash cam in your car? Me myself, I just bought or I just recently used a car, and it's just it's just one of my top things that I need to buy next. Do you use biometric security? Because this is one of the strongest and seamless security control that you can use. Are you learning, and intentionally trying to learn more about security? Thank you for being here, because I know since you are here, you are trying to learn. This is your security layer, the layers of security. I hope after this, you became a better human firewall, or you get more interest in security, and you now have the depth, the knowledge of the depth of opportunities and struggles in the information security. I want to leave you with this last quote from the um, uh, from the pioneer and head of the sites field in this conference. He once mentioned to me, if a hacker is as good as Michael Jordan is in basketball, maybe 5 defending players would not be enough to stop him. But maybe 50 defending players on the court can. There's no perfect security. There are a lot of gaps and vulnerabilities in the system. But if you're an additional defending player as a human firewall, together we can create a better security, not only for your companies or the country, but for your home and for yourself as well. With that, thank you so much. Apologies because I went over my allotted time for over 10 minutes, and I hope you learned something today.